Chapter 8 is discussing technical reports and proposals. So when we think about additional engineering documents that are larger in nature, some of the options that we have are technical reports, proposals and bids, and grants. And so technical reports, you often think of as basically kind of a larger lab document, but typically when we write technical reports in industry settings, these are still formal written documents to follow a specific format. And in fact, in many ways, they're very similar to journal articles. With a slightly extended literature review, they could actually function as journal articles as well within engineering education. For example, if you were to go for a master's or a doctorate in engineering. Proposals and bids are also formally written documents that follows the format that was provided by the person who is soliciting the work. And their focus is really more on information about the future work, the costs and timelines. And then grants are a specific form of proposals that aligns with large corporations or federal entities or government agencies that are awarding funding based on desired project outcomes. So for our technical report, we really want to make sure that we are describing accurately a methodology, analysis, and results of a project, or possibly an experiment or research activity, whatever the report may be about. Really, the focus is on the results or innovations or updates to the various stakeholders. So the shape of your technical report will be dictated by the audience that it is targeting. And so if this is an internal document, you might have a template provided to you. If you know you are presenting to the executive levels, you might have one focus compared to presenting new information to a body of engineers, where you might have a slightly different focus. So technical reports start with an abstract. Earlier in the course, we discussed executive summaries. And while executive summaries are brief overviews of every single section of the full paper, an abstract is really kind of a large paragraph, and it provides information on the rationale behind the work, the methodology, the approach used for data analysis and results. And the goal is that there's enough information so people know whether or not they want to read it. The full report will have all of the details, but the abstract is often what appears in search engines and databases. And so when you did your library research and looked up journal articles, you saw that the abstract was provided and you could read it to know if this article was in fact a good fit for your work, because simply a title can be a little bit misleading. You don't necessarily know the focus of the full report until you have read the abstract. The body of the report starts with the introduction, and you really want to see the importance and purpose of the experiment. So this includes introducing relevant variables, introducing your approach to the methodology that ensures rigor, and the goals for the current outcome or hypothesis that you might have. So what do you think is going to happen, or what do you hope is going to happen? You also want to provide a scoping content, which just helps point the reader to what's most important about your method, the context in which the experiment is conducted, data collection, the analysis, and even the conclusions. And so this is really talking about what the reader should focus on. So as they go through this document, they already have their eyes out for the most important content. Your methodology is what you did and why you did it that way. And so the methodology should support the validity of your experiment. And so if you think back to the earlier chapters that talked about hallmarks of research, we talked about robust designs and rigorous research designs, things that would prove the internal and external validity of your work. Your methodology should support that, and it should directly support your overall goal. So if your goal is to determine a relationship between two things, then your methodology should have those two things interacting so you can document a relationship. The methodology also impacts your data collection, what samples you take, how often, where they come from, or what output the data is presented on. So if you're using some sort of measurement device, it might digitally store all of the output, but it's the methodology of your experiment and data collection are going to impact your results. And then finally, if there were any limitations to your execution, do you have any nuisance variables, those things that are outside your control that can still impact the outcome? All of those things should be addressed in your methodology. When we get to the presentation of data, it's really going to be specific to your experiment. You don't have standard items that must be presented in your data. You want to look at what's relevant for your work. So are there specific formulas or are there constants that were involved in your theoretical framework that helped to frame your experiment? What about the statistical analysis? What sample size did you use and why? How was that chosen? Did you measure every iteration? Perhaps there was no sampling. You just took measurements for every single element of your experiment. Descriptive statistics, the maximum, the minimum, the average, standard deviation, standard error, those are all things that you can calculate very easily in Excel and do a good job of describing the raw data. Relative uncertainty or relative error, those are ways of seeing how accurate and precise your data is. And potentially you might need hypothesis testing. Maybe you're comparing two different things and seeing is one better than the other. Hypothesis testing, like specifically a Z or a T test, can help determine that. And then you would also have graphical summaries and displays of your data. So very rarely do you provide all of the raw data. We talked about this earlier in the course as well. But you want to provide graphical summaries that help the reader of your report better understand the focus. And so you don't need to include graphs and tables for everything, but you do want to include enough visuals that the reader truly understands what data was collected and what the data shows. So then your narrative for the analysis of data will draw the connections between the results and your overall objective for the work. Also, there might be a comparison to a hypothesis or an expected outcome, or perhaps there are industry standards or benchmarks that have been established, and you want to compare your work to the leaders in the industry or the industry average achievements in certain areas. There should also be extensions of the results based on your experiment. So what do your results mean in a broader context? Is this experiment limited to its individual instance, or does this tell us something about a system that we can now predict the outcomes of other experiments based on the work that you have done? And so in your conclusion, you want to summarize the full report, depending on length, and some of these can be quite lengthy. The reader might not clearly remember all of the different topics that were addressed. And so again, you want to highlight those that are most important to the work at hand. You don't need to restate everything, but summarize those areas that were most important. You want to reiterate whether or not your work accomplished the desired outcome. Did it work, in other words? Did you get the results you were hoping for when you set out to do this? Are there opportunities for improvement or expansion of your work? How does this apply in the field and what happens next? All of these are areas that the conclusion can address. Now, for proposals and bids, these are also larger technical documents that are either going to request others to bid on work you need completed or to reply a bid for work that you can complete to meet their needs. Oftentimes, you're going to be focusing on a scope of work, a timeline, a budget, and any specific contractual terms for completion. Or potentially exiting a contract if completion is not actually going to take place. Those formats are often provided by the agencies that are interacting. They specify what content must be included, and it can vary company to company, industry to industry. So we see here a couple different examples of requests for proposals, what a completed bid proposal might look like, or a company that is submitting a project proposal to be accepted for work that they would complete. So these types of templates are often various by the industry that you're in or the company that you work for, but a lot of the content remains the same in these cases. In the case of grant proposals, you are often following a format that has been provided by the granting agency. Because grants are a type of proposal where you're requesting funding for a specific program or project. So these often come from very large corporations, especially those that have large amounts of charitable giving. And then also federal agencies or government bodies use this to solicit subject matter expertise to complete work that they're looking to have done. So it might be the Department of Labor or the Department of Energy or the National Science Foundation or the National Institute for Health. You know, there are many different federal and government agencies that supply funding so that professional researchers can come up with solutions and information and products and projects to address areas that they want to consider. And so the granting agencies provide the money for you to complete specific objectives within a certain time frame. And so I've got two different examples here. One is actually from an undergraduate research in Oklahoma, and then the other one is from the Lilly Corporation here in Indiana. So all of these are types of documents you might interact with over the course of your career as an engineer. The focus assignment for this course is a technical report on an experiment that you yourself designed, and it will follow the template that's provided to you within the course. And our content for our technical reports really focus on your methodology, the data, and the conclusions that you draw from your own generated experiment.